So there's lots of different ways that we get ideas for our research. A lot of times, this is very interesting. So a lot of times, so we have lab meetings every 2 weeks where my research group we meet, and certain individuals each time we meet are responsible for making a presentation of their research. Okay, very informal, maybe a few PowerPoint slides, and we ask questions and we offer advice wherever they're maybe have some pitfalls in their research. Okay, and a lot of times when I see the data up on the screen, I'll get an idea. Okay, even though it's not new to me, even though I'm talking to these people every day about about their research and their results, once I see it in semi-formalized, we're like, oh, wait a minute, we're missing that control.
Right.
Or wait a minute, we haven't thought about this, or maybe even thinking about the next step. So that's one way. Okay, so we follow the standard scientific method, right? So our ideas lead to a hypothesis, and then we come up with some idea of how to test that hypothesis, and then that's at least in our means, with respect to the maybe the equipment that we have based on our limitations, in equipment or financial limitations or whatever. So we come up with some experiments to test that hypothesis, and then we have a result, and that result either supports the hypothesis or it refutes the hypothesis. It never proves the hypothesis. There's no such thing, right? Can never prove anything in science, right? So we always say it supports our hypothesis or it refutes our hypothesis. So I guess at that point we've made some knowledge, right? And then how that experiment comes together with other experiments in the lab to come up with a story that we would write a scientific manuscript on and submit that to the journal. And I don't know if once you publish something, I suppose you've added to the knowledge of your field once you publish something. Down the road, a new technique might become available, or a new, a new way of doing something may become available, or new pieces of equipment that are better and more sensitive may come along, which would change the way that we would interpret our data, right? So I always say in the manuscript, the results section is the most important, okay, where you give your results. Because if you've done your experiments properly, that will never change, okay? But the way you interpret those results could change in the future based on, like I said, newer, better, more sensitive equipment, new methodologies that are developed. Just when other scientists add knowledge to the field and you apply that to old results, you're like, oh, that's not what it meant. Right. So whether it's ever an accepted fact, I don't know. There's a bunch of textbooks there, okay?
Right.
On the shelf, right? There's a bunch of textbooks. And those are presumably accepted facts, but...
Right.
So this is, I don't know how many people do science this way, but I always do science when I'm designing a project for a graduate student. I think of it as a story, okay? Mm-hmm. What is the story that we're going to want to tell? And what are we going to need to tell that story, okay? So it's based on our hypothesis. So it's not like I'm making up data, okay? But we actually sketch out figures ahead of time. Again, we're not fabricating data, okay? Mm-hmm. But we're saying, for example, if we, we need a cell that's making a specific protein. So we're going to need to do this experiment to show that that cell is making that protein. Right. And once we've proven that the cell is making that protein, then here's what we're going to do with that cell line to answer questions X, Y, and Z. And we actually almost sketch out the paper before we even start. Right? Okay. This tomorrow in the graduate level class we're talking about. I think it's unethical to do research, especially federally funded research, and to have reams and reams and reams of data on your shelf and not publish it. I think it's unethical, because that money, that research was done with taxpayers' dollars. And so we don't own it. The taxpayer owns it, right? Because it comes from federal agencies and they get their money from tax dollars. And so I'm very careful when we're designing projects and designing experiments in the lab, that what story is this going to be part of? What publication is it going to be part of? What grant is it going to be part of? I mean, it's fun to do fun experiments. It's not that we don't do some of those, but we're very careful about, okay, what story is this part of? And we have multiple stories that are going on in the lab. I think Steve talks about this writing to learn, right? Doesn't he mention that? A lot of times I'll be writing a paper that's from data from the research associate in my lab, and I'll be writing. And in writing, I will discover that we have forgotten something, that we have forgotten to do an experiment, or we need an extra experiment. And sometimes I'll go to my team, I said, I think we're missing this control. And they're like, oh, why didn't you tell us before? I'm like, I didn't discover it till I started writing. You see if there's more in your text?
I see nothing more.
I did it as Patreon one, and there was very.
Yeah, I was wondering if you did the 1 to 10,000, if you can see a difference. It's interesting that the non-specific band goes away in the serum free
Yeah.
thing.
So it's something in this.
That one is.